You ever notice how a woman can cheat on a man and somehow make him feel like the guilty one? It sounds impossible until you've lived through it. The sudden sweetness, the random anger, the over-the-top defensiveness. These aren't moods, they're clues. And most men miss them because they look nothing like guilt. But here's the truth. Guilt in women doesn't show itself through honesty. It leaks through 5 hidden signs they can't control, even when they're trying to hold it all together. Today, I'm going to show you those 5 signs so clearly that you'll never mistake them again. If you've ever felt something was off, this is your confirmation. Most men assume guilt shows itself through apology, regret, or confession. That's how you operate. When you cross a line, the pressure builds until you let it out. But women don't release guilt the way you do. They reorganize it. They contain it. They reshape it into something they can live with. And that difference is the reason so many men miss the signs that something has shifted right under their noses. A woman who betrays you isn't just dealing with the guilt of the act. She's fighting a second war beneath the surface. The fear that she's no longer the good woman she believes herself to be. That internal clash creates a psychological tension that must go somewhere. It can't stay quiet. It doesn't stay still. It leaks out through emotion, tone, energy, and behavior she never intended to reveal. This is where identity dissonance takes over. When a woman sees herself as loving, loyal, and morally grounded, but her actions contradict that identity, her mind doesn't collapse. It compensates. It adjusts her emotional responses so her self-image can survive. But in doing so, she unintentionally produces patterns. Consistent, predictable, and impossible to suppress once you know what to look for. This is the part most men never understand. You're watching her words. You're studying her explanations. You're replaying her tone. But you're missing the real evidence, the behavioral pressure points created by guilt. She can't process cleanly. You're not just observing a woman acting strangely. You're observing a mind under stress, scrambling to protect the version of herself she needs to believe in. And when you don't understand this architecture, you get confused. You think the sweetness is love. You think the anger is stress. You think the defensiveness is insecurity. You think the sudden effort is hope. You think the tears are honesty. None of those are what they seem. They're the emotional exhaust fumes of guilt trying to preserve its own stability. Once you see this blueprint, everything changes. You no longer judge her reactions at face value. You no longer take every outburst personally. You no longer get blindsided by waves of affection that feel too good to be real. You start reading the deeper signal, the one she can't control. A woman can hide the story she tells you. She can even hide the story she tells herself. But she cannot hide the patterns guilt forces her to display. Number 1. Overcompensation. It usually starts with sweetness that doesn't match the season you're in, the kind that feels warm on the surface, but carries a strange chill underneath. Suddenly she's affectionate, attentive, soft, in ways she hasn't been for months. She texts more. She compliments more. She reaches for you in bed like she's rediscovered something precious. And for a moment, you think she finally woke up and remembered who you are. But what you're feeling isn't connection. It's compensation. When a woman has crossed a boundary she never expected herself to cross, her mind enters a quiet bargain. If I do something good, maybe it balances the wrong. This is moral balancing, and it's one of the most reliable signs she is managing a truth she hasn't admitted out loud. She's not showing love. She's trying to erase the stain on her own conscience. And the betrayal always reveals itself in the details. Her smile is bright, but her eyes don't join the warmth. Her voice rises in sweetness, but her chest is tight, her breathing shallow, her gestures feel generous, but the timing is suspiciously perfect. Right after a weekend she can't explain. a night she was strangely unreachable, or a shift in her mood she tries to brush away. There's a difference between love and performance. Real affection rises slowly. It deepens with consistency. But guilt-driven affection comes in waves, intense, sudden, and out of rhythm with reality. You'll notice her presence feels both close and distant at the same time. She's holding your hand, but her energy is somewhere else. She's saying all the right things, but none of it lands the way it used to. Something in you registers the mismatch, even if you can't name it yet. That's the danger. Most men relax when they feel this sudden tenderness. They let their guard down. They take the sweetness as proof the relationship is healing. But what you're actually seeing is the emotional shield she builds to protect herself from the guilt pressing against her identity. The sweetness isn't a bridge back to you. It's a barricade built to keep her conscience quiet. Real love grows its roots in truth. Guilt love spikes from fear. And once that spike fades, the crash begins. The warmth cools. The tension returns. The disconnect resurfaces. And you're left wondering why her affection felt like a performance instead of a homecoming. When sweetness arrives out of nowhere, don't get lost in the softness. Pay attention to the shadow behind it. Number 2, irritability and emotional displacement. Right after the sweetness fades, the storm begins. And it always catches men off guard because the shift feels too sharp, too sudden, too disconnected from anything real. One day she's warm, gentle, almost overly affectionate. The next, she's irritated by the sound of your voice, the way you breathe, or the way you place a cup on the counter. Nothing has changed except her conscience, and her conscience needs somewhere to unload the pressure. This is emotional displacement. When she can't tolerate the weight of what she's done, she pushes that weight onto the safest target available. You not because you caused it, but because you're the one who won't fight back. You're steady, you're predictable, you're familiar, and that makes you the perfect place for her guilt to land. You'll notice the pattern. You say something neutral, and she fires back like you insulted her. You follow the routine you've had for years, and she suddenly criticizes every step you ask a simple question, one you've asked 1,000 times, and she reacts as if you're interrogating her. The volatility doesn't fit the moment, the anger doesn't match the trigger, and the tension doesn't reflect reality. That mismatch is your signal. Behind her irritation is a silent narrative she's trying to build. If I can convince myself he's the problem, I don't have to deal with what I did. It's a psychological escape hatch. By exaggerating your flaws, she quiets the voice reminding her she crossed a line. And if she can get you to doubt yourself, if she can get you to apologize, explain, or walk on eggshells, she gets temporary relief from the pressure crushing her identity. This is where many men lose themselves. Instead of recognizing the displacement, they try to fix the mood. They try to be softer, kinder, more patient. They search for what they did wrong. They twist themselves into a smaller version of who they are just to keep the peace. But the more you shrink, the bigger her justification becomes. Her irritation is not about the dish you left in the sink or the text you forgot to send. It's about rewriting the emotional story so she doesn't have to face her own betrayal. When her reaction doesn't match the moment, don't chase the calm. Watch the pattern. Because anger that grows from reality is understandable, but anger that replaces guilt is manipulation in disguise. If her hostility makes no sense, it's not hostility. It's displacement, plain and simple. Number 3, defensive overreaction. This is the moment everything feels upside down. You ask a simple question, something harmless, something logical, and she reacts like you just accused her of a crime. You're calm. You're steady. You're merely trying to understand why she didn't answer her phone, or who she was texting, or why her energy has shifted. But the second the words leave your mouth, her entire body changes. Her shoulders tense, her voice sharpens, her eyes flick away for half a second, just long enough for you to notice, not long enough for her to admit. And suddenly, she's raising her tone, questioning your intentions, or throwing accusations that feel completely out of proportion. Confusion hits you like a wave, and you find yourself thinking, why is she reacting like this when I barely asked anything? Because your question isn't the threat. Her guilt is. When a woman is hiding something, her nervous system enters a subtle survival mode. It's threat sensitivity, the sense that exposure could happen at any moment. You're not her enemy, but your curiosity feels like danger to the version of herself she's trying to protect. Even neutral questions become triggers because they get too close to the truth she's avoiding. That's why you'll see micro-signals she can't fully control. Her breathing changes, faster, tighter. Her tone jumps instead of flows. She gives explanations longer than necessary, as if rehearsing while she speaks, and her energy feels chaotic, like she's fighting on two fronts, defending herself from you and defending herself from her own conscience. Most men misinterpret this. They assume she's upset because the question was poorly timed, or because she's stressed, or because she feels judged. But the reality is simpler and colder. She's not reacting to your words. She's reacting to the fear of being exposed. Gaslighting often slips in here, not as a calculated plan, but as a reflexive shield. She'll call you insecure, paranoid, controlling. She'll flip the narrative so fast you start questioning your own intentions, and that, to her, is relief, because if you're doubting yourself, she doesn't have to face what she's hiding. But the truth is clear once you understand the pattern. A woman who is clean has no reason to overreact. A woman who is hiding will always respond like you've struck a nerve. Drama is not an accident here. It's a defense mechanism against the truth she refuses to face. And when the defensiveness peaks, another shift begins. One where guilt tries to repair the damage it created. Number 4. Sudden relationship repair mode. Just when her defensiveness reaches its peak, when every question feels like a battlefield and every conversation twists into chaos, she shifts again. Almost overnight. The anger softens, the tension dissolves. The woman who snapped at you for breathing too loudly is suddenly tender, cooperative, and eager to work things out. To most men, this feels like hope. It feels like a turning point. It feels like she finally sees the damage and wants to rebuild what the two of you lost. But what you're witnessing has nothing to do with healing the relationship. It's about repairing her identity, not repairing the bond. This shift is psychological self-preservation. After cycles of guilt, projection, and defensiveness, she becomes overwhelmed by the dissonance inside her. The picture she holds of herself, kind, loyal, trustworthy, is cracking. So she moves into a frantic emotional sprint to tape the cracks back together. That's why the effort feels urgent rather than consistent. She wants to sit down and talk. She wants to reconnect. She wants to show you she cares. She may even bring up therapy, quality time, or getting back to us. But listen carefully to what she avoids. Specifics. Her apologies are vague. Her explanations are incomplete. Her insight into her own behavior is shallow. She's trying to soothe the atmosphere without exposing the cause. You'll hear phrases like, "I haven't been myself lately. I just want us to be strong again. I don't want to lose what we have." Beautiful words, until you realize none of them address the actual fracture, their emotional decoration, not emotional honesty. And this is the part where many men step right into the trap. They feel relieved. They feel chosen again. They feel the weight lifting off their chest. They confuse effort with truth. But when effort is driven by guilt instead of clarity, it becomes manipulation dressed as affection. The urgency isn't about you. It's about her need to silence the guilt before it consumes her. A woman acting from genuine desire to repair moves steadily, humbly, transparently. A woman acting from emotional panic moves fast, speaks softly, and hopes you won't look too closely at the cracks she's hiding behind her sudden warmth. Affection can soothe your fears, but urgency should wake you up. Because when her need to fix things appears out of nowhere, it's not reconciliation, it's damage control. Number 5, the guilt-shifting confession. This is the moment most men think they finally receive the truth. The moment she sits down across from you, eyes wet, voice trembling, hands shaking just enough to signal vulnerability, she tells you she needs to talk. She says it's important. She stares at the floor, breathes unevenly, and starts with the classic, "I need to tell you something." Your stomach drops. Your chest tightens. You brace yourself for the blow. And then she says it. She cheated. But the strange thing is what happens next. Instead of feeling anger, clarity, or closure, you feel confused. You feel emotional. You feel guilty. And you walk away, wondering how a confession about her actions somehow turned into a conversation about your shortcomings, because this confession was never designed to free you. It was designed to free her. A woman consumed by guilt eventually reaches a breaking point. She can't hold the secret anymore. The dissonance becomes too loud to ignore. But instead of offering clean accountability, she wraps the truth in emotional narrative. One that softens her guilt and shifts part of the emotional weight onto your shoulders. You'll hear phrases shaped to blur responsibility. I was lonely. We were drifting. I felt invisible. You were distant. I didn't want to, but I was hurting. It's not an explanation, it's a rearrangement of blame. She mixes remorse with justification, vulnerability with accusation. It's emotional inversion, turning her wrongdoing into a story about her pain. And because you're human, because you care, because you never wanted to see her hurt, you start absorbing the emotional load she's trying to unload. This is not the confession of someone ready to face consequences. This is the confession of someone trying to negotiate them. Watch the structure. She shares the truth. She adds emotional context. She blends in your supposed failures. She highlights her suffering. She leans into tears. She waits for comfort. And many men give it. They end up consoling the woman who betrayed them. That's the power of guilt when it disguises itself as fragility. True remorse centers the harm done to you. Manipulative remorse centers the pain she felt while doing it. If you walk away from the confession feeling confused instead of grounded, burdened instead of respected, guilty instead of clear, understand exactly what happened. You weren't given honesty. You were given strategy. Once you've seen the patterns of guilt clearly, the next step is understanding how to respond without losing yourself in the emotional storm she creates, because that's the real danger. Not the guilt itself, but the way it pulls you into roles you were never meant to play. The fixer, the comforter, the apologizer, the man who bends until he breaks. You can't control her guilt, but you can control your ground. And that shift changes everything. The first move is emotional distance. Not coldness, not punishment, distance. You stop reacting to her spikes and crashes as if each one requires action from you. You give yourself space to observe instead of absorb. When she swings into sweetness, you don't melt. When she lashes out, you don't shrink. When she gets defensive, you don't explain yourself. Distance turns the emotional fog into a clear landscape. Next, you master the art of the neutral question. Short, steady, factual. No tension in your voice, no accusation in your tone. You're not seeking reassurance, you're seeking clarity. And clarity is uncomfortable for anyone hiding the truth. That discomfort tells you more than any long explanation ever will. Then you stop taking ownership of emotions that aren't yours. Her loneliness, not your fault. Her stress, not your responsibility. Her guilt, never your burden. Guilt-driven behavior loses power the moment you refuse to carry the emotional weight she's trying to hand you. You stay grounded. You stay centered. You let her sit with the consequences of her own contradictions. Boundaries become your frame. You decide what's acceptable. You decide what respect looks like. You decide the terms of emotional engagement, not through arguments or speeches, but through calm consistency. Boundaries aren't about controlling her. They're about controlling your space. And when you protect your emotional space, you stop being the easiest place for her guilt to land. Above all, you don't chase harmony. Harmony without clarity is manipulation wearing perfume. You prioritize truth over peace, even when it feels uncomfortable. Because discomfort is temporary. Deception becomes a lifestyle. This is the shift she never expects. The moment you stop chasing her calm, she loses her power over your storm. She can no longer pull you into loops of sweetness, anger, panic, or tears. You've stepped out of the emotional maze, and now you're watching it from the outside, with vision she can't cloud. Awareness is only the beginning. Control is what comes next. Now that you've seen the truth behind these emotional shifts, everything begins to make sense. The sweetness that felt too perfect. The irritation that came out of nowhere. The defensiveness that didn't match your calm. The sudden effort to fix what she spent weeks breaking. The confession that left you carrying the weight she created. None of those moments were random. None of them were accidental. They were the natural footprints of guilt a woman can't fully control. A woman can hide her actions for a while. She can hide her messages, her excuses, her stories, even her late-night alibis. But she cannot hide the patterns guilt forces into her behavior. Those patterns will always rise to the surface. They rise in her tone, her timing, her energy, her contradictions, and her emotional volatility. And once you recognize them, you stop being confused. You stop being pulled into a cycle you never agreed to join. You're not here to carry the consequences of someone else's choices. You're here to understand the terrain you're walking on. And with that understanding comes something most men never get back once they start doubting themselves. Emotional power. The power to stay calm when she spikes. The power to stay steady when she crumbles. The power to stay clear when she tries to blur the edges of what really happened. You've seen the 5 signs for what they truly are. Signals of a mind trying to protect itself from the truth it created. And now you can move differently. You're no longer reacting to her patterns. You're reading them. You're no longer accepting the story she's offering. You're seeing the one her behavior reveals guilt is invisible. But its footprints aren't. And now you can see every single one of them. If this breakdown opened your eyes, if it helped you put words to the tension you've been feeling, then do the one thing that strengthens this community. Subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement keeps this message alive and helps other men stop blaming themselves for patterns they didn't create. It's not just support, it's protection for you and for every man who needs to hear the truth before he loses himself in someone else's guilt.